time, I would ask that for the remainder of your answer, if you could provide that testimony in writing and direct it to our clerk. That way we will be able to distribute the full answer as quickly as possible to the rest of our committee members. But we'll now go to Mr. Green for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses who've made themselves available today. I have had the privilege of serving for the Hamilton Community Foundation here locally. As a former city council, I've been involved in our local enrichment fund, which gives out millions of dollars annually. And so I'm curious through you, Mr. Chair, to the charity intelligence folks, if they would care to comment what their processes for adequate due diligence are for their clients. What does that mean?
I provided it in the opening statement, so it's on the record for the for your committee.
So then, for the record, there's been a number of red flags that you've raised publicly in other places, and I'll recount them, and then you can comment on them. Huge real estate holdings, highly unusual for a charity of this nature. Large amount of debt. Debt is constantly changing.
No.
If I can just finish, and then you can comment on it. You can refute it or not. Debt is changing. We has been in breach of the bank covenants on its debt for 2 years, in 2018 and 2019. Through the auditor, says the bank had waived these covenants. Me2We's app, their past app, was a failure, and it's no longer available. Potentially, it was sold to the We charity for $1. I still have the question on where that loss went. 6 board members of the We board resigned in March, including their board chair. They're replaced by 4 new directors, one of whom has since resigned. The new chair is essentially, he's a former high school teacher, so I'm unsure about where the professionally qualified independent board of directors are. Me2We, the for-profit, is supposed to generate funds for the We charity, but it appears that funds are flowing in the opposite direction without proper transparent disclosure. And KRP LLP, as has been noted, is the only auditor We has ever had, and it is the only charity, as I believe you've claimed publicly, that KRP audits. So I'm going to break that down now, and then you can respond, and then we can go from there because I only have 4 minutes left. So on the real estate holdings and the debt, would you care to comment on the real estate holdings and the debt?
Sure, absolutely. Charity Intelligence, we are financial analysts. We are research analysts, and our research is objective and impartial. On the real estate holdings, we see no red flags there. We see many charities across Canada, YMCAs, universities, hospitals, camps having significant real estate holdings. That was nothing that Charity Intelligence ever drew a red flag to.
These are points that have been drawn. Large amounts of debt, you would agree?
Not in relation to its equity, no. So relative to its real estate, what we reported was that there was a breach in bank loan covenants. We did not say that it was overextended. We did not say it had poor credit. I think it's really important to be accurate with what is reported and what is not reported.
So what was reported today is that they're looking at selling some of their assets. Would you care to?
Charity Intelligence did not report on that. We do not do real estate. I do not know what their listings are in the Toronto market.
So given their position as the online pilot project, you identified that they had no previous history in this. Yes. I would agree. They did have an app though. Do you have any comment on the failure of their past app and its transition from what appears to be the for-profit to the charity?
The We 365 app is in the audited financial statements, and it is immaterial when you're looking at a $60 million charity.
Okay. Relating to your due diligence, you talk about transparency and accountability. I'm to assume the accountability would be to the board. Would you have?
No. So we define accountability. So when you talk about boards, that's governance.
Right.
And governance is not a metric that Charity Intelligence reports on. Accountability to us is when you take the time to go through a charity's annual report or the information on its website. Is there enough information there for a donor to make an informed and intelligent giving decision?
So is there enough, so you don't comment on governance at all with your clients?
we will do it in due diligence, but it's not one of the metrics in our rating.
Regardless of the metrics, would you consider it normal to have that kind of turnover within a board prior to a major project like this?
When the information came out in late June and was confirmed through our discussions with We Charity Management in July, our concerns led to us issuing a donor advisory, which is our most serious red flag.
That is a serious red flag. And it seems like a very basic level of due diligence, regardless of whether you're looking at it from a financial perspective or for a government perspective. This is something that you knew, that you identified in 2 days, and yet our government failed to do.
But that information only came to light after the contract was signed, almost after the contract was canceled. That only came to light in late June.
But the transitions happened before that.
So that's the question of, is a charity under an obligation to inform a funder or the government in this case when you're doing a serious deal of this size? Is the obligation to be full and frank disclosure? And
would you comment that it is or it is not?
I believe it should be. But the question is, does the government have to ask, or does the government or does a charity have to freely disclose such material information?
Well, I think if it's full and frank, the answer would be yes.
I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. I appreciate the testimony we've heard so far. And just want to follow up on some of the previous questions. A number of questions have been raised, and this is for Charity Intelligence. A number of questions have been raised by the Byzantine nature of the We network of charities and for-profit ventures. Is this type of convoluted network common in the charity world?
No, it's not common. I mean, we often, if we're analyzing a charity, we'll often have to look at, usually we look at one set of financial statements and one organization. We will often look at two. If they have a foundation that's associated with an operating charity, or if there's a national charity that's associated with a provincial charity, there might be two. The odd time we'll see three. In the case of We Charity, at this point we've got, I think, 13 related parties in North America that we would have to at least have an understanding of as we write up our analysis. So We Charity is not typical of charities in Canada.
Okay, thank you for that. Again, Charity Intelligence, you have publicly asked why Craig and Mark Kielburger are listed as co-founders of We, rather than as directors, officers, or trustees. Can you just provide an explanation as to why that question is important, especially as it relates to the CSSG contract?
So if you are on the board of directors, or if you are an executive of a charity, any financial transactions that take place between you and the charity have to be fully disclosed in the audited financial statements. As a co-founder or a founder, there's no fiduciary responsibility, there's no executive responsibility, and so that just led us to the question of why Mark and Craig, who seemingly have an awful lot of executive power in the We organization, are neither executives nor on the board of directors.
Okay, thank you. And I'm not sure how much time I have, but finally, Mark Bloomberg was quoted in a Globe and Mail article on August 1st. He's a lawyer whose specialty is in the charitable sector, and he said this regarding We Charity. It's not, and I quote, "It's not like any charity that I've ever seen, so I wouldn't draw too many conclusions about the charity sector from this group. But I think what makes it clear to me is that we need more transparency in the charity sector." And I think we've been hearing that a little bit, certainly just in response to some of the questions by Mr. Green. There was this back and forth about full and frank disclosure, whether a government needs to ask or an entity who's seeking to have an organization oversee a contract on their behalf, whether or not there is that full and frank disclosure, or whether that the government would have needed to ask. And so I guess I'm wondering, can you comment on Mr. Bloomberg's conclusion that there is more transparency needed in the charity sector, and quite frankly on the process of governments, what they can rightly expect from a charity if they
Can I answer this one?
are yes.
Greg, do you mind if I take this one? This is my passion. We've been championing for financial transparency since the very, very beginning. And I want to say we still face this battle. This summer alone, we have over 100 requests for information, and with the Charities Directorate, we're looking at some of Canada's largest charities with over $5 to $10 million in donations, who still refuse to put their audited financial statements up on their website. And so we have to go through that process of filing with the CRA, and it will take 8 to 9 months before we get that relevant information. But We Charity was financially transparent. It had its audited financial statements on its website. So we need to push for more financial transparency. But I also believe that people who have a fiduciary responsibility in writing checks with other people's money need to do their homework. And the audited financial statements were right there on the website. And I appreciate that the vast majority of giving is marketing and branding and who's doing the ask. But at the end of the day, we just are such believers in due diligence. So I hope all donors start reading the fine print.
Thank you very much. We'll now go for 5 minutes to Mr. McKinnon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Just a quick question for you, Ms. Bayan. You seem a little exasperated that perhaps some of my colleagues here or others seem to be putting words in your mouth. I think we can all agree that financial accountability, transparency in the charitable sector is a desired outcome, and having knowledgeable donors is clearly an objective of yours and a passion, and one that we should all share. But I do sense that you're a little exasperated that people are trying to put words in your mouth. Is that true?
Maybe more terrified about the defamation suits down the road. So I think we need to be very careful and very precise in the language we use, and what we have reported and what we have not commented on.
Well, that's a very good segue to my question for Ms. Pico. The opposition, I think, are responsible for your presence here today. Why do you think the opposition, the Conservatives, asked you to testify before us today? You're on mute.
I got an email on Monday asking me to come to the committee and testify. I was surprised. I asked, who would do that? And I only know now that it was the opposition. So possibly the opposition, because I've been critical, and I, as Kate Bain believes too, I have been vocal and critical about how the charity sector carries out its business for the past decade. And the full title of my book in 2017 was Cap in Hand: How Charities Are Failing the People of Canada and the World. So there is a lot of, and Kate and I, although I don't put as much focus on financial measurements as Charity Intelligence does, we both believe that impact, it's really important to gauge impact in charities. And there are a lot of charities in Canada that don't give the taxpayer a very good bang for their buck. And you can talk about donors, but taxpayers are basically fund charities more than anybody else. So perhaps they thought that I would automatically take a negative approach.
Our normal round of questionings, which will be 6 minutes for the first round, 5 minutes for the second round, and then 2.5 minutes for the last round. Angela, who is our first witness?
Mr. Greg Thompson of Charity Intelligence Canada, and he's accompanied by Ms. Kate Bahan, and Mr. Thompson will start.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Greg Thompson. I'm Director of Research for Charity Intelligence Canada. Charity Intelligence is itself a charity, one that analyzes Canadian charities to help donors be informed and give intelligently. Our website hosts free reports on more than 780 Canadian charities and provides insight into specific giving areas such as the environment, cancer, and homelessness. Last year, 314,000 Canadian donors used our website for information on Canadian charities, reading over 1.3 million charity reports. We estimate that our research helped inform and influence $95 million in Canadian charitable giving last year alone. Just as democracy depends on informed citizens, the fundamental health of philanthropy rests on well-informed donors. Our own research supports this case. In surveys of donors who have used our resources, 77% said that Charity Intelligence reports have improved their confidence in giving to charities and have inspired these donors to give 32% more money to charities. Over the past few weeks, a significant amount of information has been reported about We Charity. CI has focused our analysis and remarks on WE's financial position, how it spends its money, the results it achieves, and its governance issues. We report fairly and consistently based on our analysis of hundreds of Canadian charities. We do not let unsubstantiated allegations impact our ratings as we strive to remove subjectivity and report on objective measures. At Charity Intelligence, we are analysts, not auditors. As well, we are analysts of charities, not government programs. Our specialty is looking at how charities spend money and what impact their programs achieve. It's within this context that CI presents to the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates today. With that, I'll pass it over to Kate Bain.
And
Hi.
could our next, thank you.
Hi, my name is Kate Bain, and I'm sorry I'm having technical difficulties here. My computer's gone on the glitch, so I'll have to just do my speech, my opening comments from scratch. But my name is Kate Bain. I'm a managing director at Charity Intelligence, and I did the updates on We Charities report in August of 2019, and more recently, this July 2020. So I'm happy to take your questions about that. I would just like to use these moments to talk to you about what is going on in the charity sector. And one of the greatest concerns is how charities are so negatively impacted by COVID-19. Imagine Canada estimates that individual giving to charities will be down by between $4 to $6 billion. And for context, in 2019, individual giving was about 17 billion. And on top of this, we have the We situation that is in the headlines every day and is really shaking donor confidence in giving to charities. The impact of this, we won't know. And I appreciate that part of the Canada Summer Students Grant Initiative was to help charities, and that students would be volunteering and giving their time to help frontline charities at this time. For many charities, volunteers are an incredibly important part of delivering program delivery. But what charities really need now is cash. And we're in August, and so far there has been so little response to the needs of Canadian charities. There is one simple thing that we believe at Charity Intelligence could significantly help Canadian charities, and that's called the disbursement quota. The disbursement quota is a little known factor about how much foundations, community foundations, and endowments are required to give of their assets to charities each year. Currently, Canada's disbursement quota is 3.5%. Canada has the lowest disbursement quota in the world. In the US, the disbursement quota is 5%. And there are calls right now in the US for raising that disbursement quota to 10% for the COVID pandemic. If Canadian charity and foundations and endowments and community foundations were to increase the disbursement quota from 3.5 to 5%. We estimate that would be an additional $700 million going to charities this year. It is completely at our finance minister's discretion. It is written within the CRA regulations that the finance minister can change the disbursement quota by the stroke of his pen. So I ask all of you from all parties to go back in caucus and talk to your parties about what we can do to help Canadian charities for the COVID pandemic. And I ask you to seriously consider raising Canada's disbursement quota to 5% at least for the COVID pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Angela, do we have another speaker or have we concluded our opening comments?
Yes, Gail Pico from the Charity Report.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pico. The floor is yours. You may have to unmute your microphone.
There.
Perfect. We
Okay.
can hear you now. Yes.
Great. Thank you, sir. And thanks for the invitation to appear in front of you today and giving me the opportunity to make this statement. I'm not specifically sure why I was asked to appear, but I'll share with you some of my background in the charity sector. I've worked for 35 years in the sector, starting with an 8-year stint as a counselor in a shelter for abused women. During the past 25 years, I've worked as a consultant to over 100 charities, advising them on fundraising and governance, impact and relevance, accountability, and transparency. For the past 10 years, I've written widely about the charity sector. My 2017 book was called Cap in Hand, and my forthcoming statement specifically related to the government's partnership with WE. And the first is the question of whether WE was the only group with the capacity to execute the CSSG. And I believe that this conclusion is not an unreasonable one. The government had already had some success in getting COVID relief delivered through partnerships with charities. In April, it gave $100 million to 5 national food security charities for emergency food relief. Shortly after, 3 national charities were tapped to channel $350 million to vulnerable communities through the Emergency Community Support Fund. But students as a group are a difficult cohort to reach. And we had student engagement, youth engagement as its mission, with connections to 15,000 schools across the country. I believe at the time that would have been seen as a plus, as post-secondary students, particularly in racialized neighborhoods, remain connected with their high school. The organization was also able to showcase its reach. Young people filled sports stadiums in 15 cities around the globe for annual WE Days. WE ambassadors were A-listers from the world of entertainment, politics, civil society, and the corporate world. They were supported by everybody that mattered. Board members of WE included senior bank executives from Scotiabank and RBC, sophisticated people with long resumes. Additionally, WE's finances, governance, and unique structure were independently and favorably reviewed by 2 of the most well-known law firms in the country, Torys LLP and Miller Thomson, as well as former Supreme Court Justice Peter Corey. All 3 founders of the organization had been awarded the Order of Canada. Additionally, Craig Kielburger had received 13 honorary degrees and doctorates. Mark Kielburger was selected as the World Economic Forum as one of the 250 global leaders. Roxane Joyal, a Rhodes Scholar who clerked for the Supreme Court of Canada, also received an honorary doctorate. In 2018, the charity had 380 full-time staff and a budget of about $48 million. To anybody from the outside evaluating WE, their qualifications would appear to have been unique and unassailable. In fact, the organization was able to generate 35,000 applications from across the country in 9 days. 35,000 young people whose stories have been lost now and whose hopes are on hold. The second point I want to make is around the ideas that charities don't spend money on speakers for entertainment, for fundraising events. Nothing could be further from the truth. While charities try to get speakers and entertainment or anything they can donated for an event, entertainment is typically part of an event budget. In 2002, the Hadassah Wizzo Children's Charity paid former US President Bill Clinton $100,000 to speak at a sold-out fundraising dinner in Toronto. And the late socialite and philanthropist Ana Maria de Souza most certainly paid the 70 Brazilian dancers she flew in from Rio de Janeiro for the iconic Brazilian Ball in Toronto, which at its peak in 2010 raised $7 million in one evening, and where, according to Toronto Life magazine, everyone who was anyone in the world of politics or business and media attended. The reason charities pay for speakers and entertainment is because there's a lot at stake. The days of the lemonade stand is over. Every year in Canada, charities raise more than $20 billion from fundraising activities, and they spend several billions of dollars in order to accomplish that. Yet even with that amount of money, government, all three levels of government, are still the primary source of funds for charity. In 2017, government supplied 70% of the $280 billion that flowed for the charity sector, which leads me to my third and final point. The charity sector is the primary means through which government executes healthcare and social service priorities. It employs 2 million people on a full-time basis and 2 million people on a part-time basis. Every day, millions of people rely on the services provided by charities. And as a consequence of the COVID pandemic, more people are becoming reliant on charities, not less. In a world full of uncertainty, Canadians are suffering through the worst crisis in modern history. Their lives have been turned upside down. Many don't know how they're going to manage. The anxiety is making some Canadians sick. Others are becoming hopeless about the future. The situation is dire. At the same time, the people who have been elected to help Canadians through the good times and the bad, some of whom are now serving as the loyal opposition, have created a crisis of their own. By transforming the weaknesses of one charity into a vehicle for an intractable partisan battle that is currently taking up the agenda of 3 parliamentary committees, including this one. The charity sector is flawed and needs to work on many problems, such as better governance, inequity, and systemic racism. Yet the increasingly partisan behavior coming out of the House of Commons is like a herd of bulls in a china shop, destroying everything in its path as it reaches for the most expensive piece of china on the top shelf, presumably a snap election that could potentially defeat the current government. You've invited me here to speak to you. My recommendation to you now is that you snap out of it, because the broken glass on the floor of that china shop is the collateral damage being inflicted on the charity sector, its employees, and the growing number of people the sector is trying to serve. And as a citizen and someone who has worked all of her professional life to address the needs of the most vulnerable people in society, I cannot overstate how deeply disturbing I find this agenda. And I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much. We'll now go into our 6-minute rounds of questions, starting with Mr. Elboutev. Mr. Elboutev.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the witnesses. I didn't expect to hear a political speech from Ms. Pico, but I have to go to Mr. Thompson and ask the following question. Is there usually a scrutiny for charities to respect official languages?
No idea.
Is there typically scrutiny when charities do not respect both official languages? Is that your question?
Yes, I'm asking about official languages. Is there usually a scrutiny for charities to respect Canada's Official Languages Act?
It would depend upon which jurisdiction they're working in. I would imagine certainly a charity working nationally, you would expect that they would have the ability to operate in both official languages.
Well, that's fantastic. You've answered a part of my question, which is going to be the next one, is that if an organization or a charity to take on a project nationwide, that organization needs to respect the Official Language Act. Is that correct?
I do not know the law on that. I do know that We Charity did have some French-speaking folks on their payroll. I understand that some of them may have been let go, but that's all under review right now.
So why then the We Charity have hired a Quebec organization to take on the operation, and if they have the capacity?
Well, I do believe that We was weak in Quebec. I mean, they had an office there for about a year. I believe they closed it down in February, their office in Montreal. So it was not an area of strength for them in the country, certainly. But they have also reported that they were going to hire PR firms in other jurisdictions to help them as well with the program.
So that means they don't have the infrastructure to run a program in Quebec or in the French-speaking cities in Canada.
From what we can see, that they were somewhat weaker in Quebec. Certainly, that's all that we know.
Well, if they're weak in Quebec, and the French language, they must be weak elsewhere where the Acadian community is quite established. Do you agree with that statement?
I'm not sure I can necessarily say that they must be. No.
Okay. Are you aware of organizations in Quebec that they will be able to take on projects as such that the We was going to take on, and within full capacity, they're able to deliver the program properly?
All we know is that they were going to be hiring national to operate their program throughout Quebec.
But if you can assist me I'm not interested in naming names. You don't have to name organizations. How many organizations you are aware of that you think they'll be capable to handle the same We project in Quebec?
How many other organizations would be able to handle the project in Quebec?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't know the nature of significant number of organizations in Quebec to be able to answer that question.
Okay. What about Mr. Behan? Will she be able to assist us on that?
That's an excellent question, and that would require due diligence to do. That would be part of the government's looking at the program and looking at what the mandate was for the program, and that would be part of any granting initiative. I haven't done that work before, so I can't answer that question.
Okay, so the process to select an organization, you mentioned the due diligence, and the French-speaking community between Quebec and the rest of other Canadian cities, probably about 25 to 30% of the total Canadian population. So it's a very significant number of people that they need the attention of program that was going to cost us $912 million. So you guys, I look at you as an expert in this field, and to understand the status in the French-speaking cities and provinces. It's quite important of a feedback to us to be able to understand why any given organization would take on a national project that must have that infrastructure to be able to deliver the project properly to all Canadians fairly and equally as it's supposed to be. So do you believe that it's a requirement for an organization to have that national scale program? The eligibility to be able to carry on this program does speak for an infrastructure, a proper one across the country. Is that correct to suggest such thing?
Well, I would say that for the government, having a student grant program for Francophone communities was a key priority. And it was part of their proposal. And it was something that they asked We Charity about. And it was one of the key priorities. So it was very important to the government in assessing the capacity of organizations. And We Charity, I believe, from what we've heard, said that it had the capacity in Quebec.
We'll have to unfortunately interrupt now because we're at the end of our 6 minutes. We'll now go to our second 6-minute intervention, Mr. Johari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the witnesses for your testimony. I'm sure that you are representing the charities and the impact that COVID-19 has had on it. Let me start with CI. I understand.